The timeline of The Legend of Zelda. It's no secret to Zelda fans that Nintendo's official timeline is sometimes less than well received. And while there are a handful of inconsistencies between the games and the structure that Nintendo officially crafted for us, there's typically one corner of the timeline most fans point their finger at, and that's the downfall timeline. The alternate reality where Link the hero is defeated by Ganondorf, causing a different set of events where most of the older games in the series take place. I know there are many theories attempting to justify or make sense of how this split can logically occur, so I thought I'd share my theory on the infamous downfall timeline. The Zelda canon at a time was one of the most debated upon topics in the Zelda franchise. It still is. And probably the most fun to debate. While theories varied wildly from each other, there was always an accepted truth among most theorists before the timeline had an official order. You could obviously place some games together in subcategories. For example, A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, the original Zelda, and Zelda 2. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, followed by their indirect sequels, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. But it was never completely clear how you could connect all the games together into one cohesive story. But when Nintendo released Skyward Sword, it was accompanied by Hyrule Historia, an official Nintendo Legend of Zelda book containing a complete canon timeline. And as most had guessed, there was a timeline split at Ocarina of Time. And to a lot of fans' dismay, there was a third branch that nobody anticipated. One where Link the hero dies at the hand of the Gerudo King, Ganondorf. Alright man, we get it, you won. No, I probably don't need to tell you that this was an unpopular decision among the Zelda community. For one, Link dies. The hero of time that has become so beloved in the world of Zelda, and so important, it was undoubtedly a hard pill to swallow. Some felt that it seemed like a cop-out, a cheap way for Nintendo to give fans what they wanted, when in reality as more games came out and different stories were told, at some point they were never really supposed to connect completely. I mean, applying this logic, anytime you got a game over, it could potentially be branching off into a whole nother timeline. And even though some of the games were loosely connected, at best, there was still a logical canon reason why one came after the other. And the timeline splitting in Ocarina of Time actually makes sense in context of the story presented. But this third branch seemed to spring up out of nowhere. An alternate reality twisting the end of Ocarina of Time that was completely severed from the story, and the reasoning behind a whole string of beloved games separating itself from the others was due to an off-screen death written in a book. You can see how this might not sit well with some fans. But what if I told you the downfall split could and should fit in the timeline, in a way that narratively connects with the whole cohesive story of The Legend of Zelda? What if I told you it's in the wrong place? Let me explain. So, in Ocarina of Time, Link defeats Ganondorf sometime after pulling the Master Sword and being sent 7 years into the future. Following their epic battle, ending in Link's victory, Zelda ends up using the Ocarina of Time to send him back to his original timeline so he can live out his lost years. This is what causes the linear timeline to split into two, resulting in the adult and child timelines. Using this logic, can you think of a time that this had happened before? If we go way back to the beginning of the timeline, when Skyward Sword takes place, we can find the same kind of time travel shenanigans taking place. If you haven't played Skyward Sword, spoilers. Or if it's been a while since you have, allow me to refresh your memory about some of the specific events that play out. Skyward Sword tells the tale of the Master Sword's origin, and the origin of the curse that plagues the bloodline of the goddess and the spirit of the hero, Zelda and Link. Towards the game's conclusion, Link, with the help of the Triforce, is able to destroy the imprisoned and eradicate the looming threat of the return of Demise. But just as he reunites with Princess Zelda and all seems well, Demise's right-hand Girahim appears, kidnaps Zelda, and rushes through the Gate of Time, with the intent on going back and using Zelda to resurrect his master, Demise, in the ancient past. And he does just that. Link has to follow him into the past and fight his way to demise after an epic battle between the hero worthy of the Master Sword and the Triforce, and essentially a god, or a devil more like. Link is victorious, and Demise is so filled with rage that he makes sure with his dying breath that he places a curse on Link and Zelda, the bloodline of the goddess and the spirit of the hero, which essentially gives us the reason for the trio that is Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf's reappearance over the ages that drives these games. Link then leaves the Master Sword in the past, and he and Zelda return to their time. But wait, according to Ocarina of Time, such timey-wimey riffraff should cause a timeline split. And maybe it did, and it's just not acknowledged. But looking at the timeline and some of the details, this is much more of a reasonable place for the Downfall timeline to split off than Ocarina of Time, where there isn't even an in-game canon reason for it to happen. If the Downfall split started way at the beginning of the timeline before Skyward Sword, not only does it give an in-game reason that there is a third timeline split, but some of the details that don't align and were lightly retconned seem to fit better. There used to be a debate on whether Ocarina of Time portrayed the imprisoning war in the backstory of A Link to the Past among timeline theorists, and I believe it being a prequel and mostly lining up with the lore presented in A Link to the Past, except a few details, we can say that it was intended to. But then as other games came out and things changed, it was retconned, and apparently it occurs after Ocarina of Time, according to Hyrule Historia. The Link to the Past manual depicts the imprisoning war, the origins of Ganondorf, and how he was locked in the Sacred Realm and obtained the entire Triforce, and how he tainted the Sacred Realm and it became what we know as the Dark World from A Link to the Past. Now in this new timeline, the events could play out just like that, Ganondorf defeating Link during the imprisoning war. Another detail that fits nicely with this theory is the presence of Twin Rova in the Oracle games, which in current canon makes no sense, because Link killed Twin Rova in the events of Ocarina of Time by the last time he faced Ganondorf, regardless of who won. But assuming Link was defeated by Ganondorf in the imprisoning war and the events did not play out like Ocarina of Time, Link never sought out the spiritual medallions or fought through any of the temples he did in Ocarina of Time, which means he never fought Twin Rova, hence their appearance in the Oracle games. And there's more. The backstory of A Link to the Past tells a different origin of the Master Sword than what we know to be canon today. Apparently, it was believed to be built by the people of Hyrule during desperate times, which was obviously retconned in Skyward Sword. But in this timeline, it was left in the ancient past and built in a different time. So to the perspective of everyone else, in this timeline, the Master Sword was just always there. And when there's no explanation for great things, as we can see in our own reality, stories and legends would be made to explain the existence of things that have no explanation. Which could explain why in the Downfall timeline, the history of the Master Sword is not correct. But the situation gives certain validity to why the legends about the Master Sword would be inaccurate. Isn't that the very nature of legends? Now I know using the logic of timeline splits would mean that this Master Sword being left in the past left the other timelines without one. But, just like Hyrule Historia, you could fill in the blanks. Perhaps they brought the goddess sword from the past and forged another, or made another with Zelda's powers. And even as the timeline is presented officially, they would have left the Master Sword in the past, so they must have done something to recreate it, because as Ocarina of Time shows us, time travel doesn't change your future. It just creates a branch reality, essentially an Avengers Endgame take on time travel. So even in the official Zelda timeline, the Master Sword in Skyward Sword was left in the past and could not be the same Master Sword we see in adult or child timelines. Maybe I'll make a video on that next. 2 Master Swords. And actually, one more piece of evidence comes to mind. Check it out. If you notice in the adult and child timelines, after Ocarina of Time, Ganondorf or Ganon only appears once, and after he is defeated. He never resurrects. Well, in Forged Swords Adventure, another Ganondorf is born. But he obtains his power from an ancient trident, and it's not the same man. It's not the same Ganon. So compare this to the Downfall timeline. Ganon is resurrected over and over and over again, the same man. Now, if you apply this to my theory that the downfall timeline actually split off before Skyward Sword in the ancient past, and you defeated Demise in this timeline, then I believe Demise's curse only applies in this timeline. Nothing else, not even the goddesses, seem to be able to exist but in one timeline at a time. And the fact that Ganon, the same Ganon, seems to come back over and over and over, and the fact that this timeline seems to have a dark tone throughout most of the games in it, seems to lend credence to this particular detail, and to my theory that the downfall timeline should branch off during Skyward Sword, instead of its existence being an alternate reality which has no in-game evidence and is only canonically correct according to a book. A very good book that I own and enjoy, by the way. So that's my theory on the downfall timeline.